So you're ready to start your first paper project with your ScanNCut? That's great. I'm Lindsay for Fontsy. Thank you so much for joining me, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing in today's video, walking you through step by step your first beginning paper project with your ScanNCut. And we'll be working on these adorable paper boxes. So darling, and a good first paper project because the design itself isn't exceptionally detailed. It's rather large. In fact, to make one of these boxes, you'll need a standard letter size piece of paper that measures 8.5 by 11. And you can find the design files for these boxes in the Paper Craft SVG design bundle over at Fontsy. There's a link in the description. The bundle has lots of awesome paper projects to choose from, and a good beginning first paper project would be something like these. And of course, for your paper project, you're going to need some paper. And I recommend for a 3D project like this, a nice heavyweight cardstock, something between a 65 to 85 or 80 pound weight would be good. You don't want something too flimsy, otherwise it's not going to, stay up straight, and anything too thick is just going to be, more difficult to work with. Other supplies that you might need are going to be some adhesive, and once you start working more and more with paper, you'll find your favorite adhesives, like whether it's a dry adhesive like a tape runner or double-sided tape, or a wet glue like a white glue. I'll actually be showing you both in this video. So there's lots of other supplies that you can round up for your project. For the dress, you'll need a thin ribbon if you want to grab any other kinds of embellishments. The sky's the limit with these kinds of projects, so round up all your supplies, turn on your ScanNCut, and we'll go ahead and get started. Start in Canvas Workspace by opening up a new document, and the cardstock that I'm working with is 8.5 by 11. So first I'm going to draw a box by going into the Shapes menu and clicking on the square icon, and then editing in the Edit panel, adjusting the size to the same size as my cardstock. And this is going to act as the bounds of my cardstock, as a guide, so that when I resize the design file, I'll know that it makes sure that it fits within the cardstock. If your cardstock is 12 by 12, then you wouldn't need to do something like this. Next, go to the SVG icon to import the box's design file. Now this is really cool, and another reason why this is a good design for beginning paper crafters, because the designer actually included instructions with the SVG. So when you open it up, there's this text, tells you the instructions, and I think that's pretty neat. Now, since I'm going to be manipulating the design file to make it a little bit larger, I have this rectangle shape on the mat here as well, but that doesn't need to be touched again. So an easy way to just kind of ignore it while you're working just with the design file is you can lock it, which means that you wouldn't be able to click on that rectangle while it's locked, and that's just going to make it easier. So when you select elements of the design you're working with, you won't be selecting that rectangle. So go into the Layers panel, and there's the rectangle shape at the bottom, and click the empty box that's next to the eye, and a picture of a little lock will appear, and that means the shape is locked, so you can't click on it in the workspace. And to unlock it, you would just click that lock icon again. So I've read the text instructions, and now I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Next, take a look at the dress shape. There are these black dashed lines in it, and you can see the elements both separately in the Layers panel. These dashed lines are your fold lines when you go to assemble the box. But as the file is now, if you click on the dress to move it, then those lines won't come along too. So to keep them together, you need to select them both. You can do that in the Layers panel by clicking on one of them and then holding Shift on the keyboard, and then click on the other, and then right click on the mouse and select Group. And now I'm going to just zoom in and make that rectangle red and thicker so it's easier for you to see. But now you can resize the dress, and you can make it big enough so that it still fits within the rectangle, which is the size of the cardstock, and that's perfect. Now you need to transfer the design to your ScanNCut, but we don't want to transfer the rectangle.
because that's not actually part of the design that we need to cut out. We were just using it as a guide for sizing. So go into the layers panel and click the eye next to the rectangle, and it will now not be shown on the mat anymore. Then go to File, Export, and export the design, and anything that's hidden, like the rectangle, won't be transferred to the ScanNCut. To get the rectangle to show again on the mat, you would just click the empty box where the eye used to be, and it would reappear on the mat again. Next, load your cardstock onto your sticky mat. If it's a brand new mat, you probably won't need much pressure to adhere that cardstock to it. But if your mat has been used before, then you can use a brayer to roll over it so that that paper is going to temporarily adhere to the mat while the machine is cutting. Then load your blade, and here's a little trick. Paper is going to dull your blade much more quickly than vinyl. So if you want to keep a blade just for cutting paper and a blade just for cutting vinyl, you can write like a little P on the paper blade and a V on the other one so you can tell them apart. Next, retrieve the design that you sent from Canvas Workspace. I need to move the design to the bottom right corner where my cardstock is aligned on my mat. So I'm just going to tap and drag that down.
Next, it's always a good idea to do a test cut. So just tap and drag the triangle test cut to somewhere on the mat that will be on the cardstock but not covering the design. Then do the test cut, and see if it'll cut. I'll use a little spatula here to pick it up and see that it cut very well. The settings that I ended up with were the pressure set to auto and speed set to 1. So those might end up being a little bit different for you, but that's why you always do a test cut. Then just click Start and let the ScanNCut do its thing. I'm using the ScanNCut SDX85, and there's a link in the description if you want to check out the machine with our friends over at Swing Design. Then once it's done, you want to unload the mat, and then here's a little trick to remove cardstock from the mat without it curling up on you. Flip the mat over and roll the mat off of the back side of the cardstock. Keep one hand on the cardstock and then just roll that mat back, and the cardstock just releases very nicely. Now for the tucks, there's one thing to keep in mind. You'll still want to group the dashed lines and the design together, but this design also has other little bits to it, like the tie and the rectangle that becomes like the shirt in the finished project. So if I were just to resize the tux box with those dashed lines, then the other bits of the design wouldn't be resized, and they would be out of proportion with the box itself. So when you resize it, you want to make sure that you resize all of it at once. And so since you have that back rectangle locked, you can click and drag across all the elements of the design to select them all, and then resize them all at one time, and you make sure that that tux box still fits within the rectangle, which represents the size of our cardstock. Then go ahead and transfer the design to your ScanNCut. Now you can cut more than one color of cardstock at a time. So I've got my gray, my white, and black cardstock on the mat. And if you need a little bit of washi tape around the edges to keep the cardstock down, then that is just fine. Then when you go to retrieve the design on the machine, you can use some of the machine's editing capabilities to move the designs to their relative position on the mat, and then also rotate them if needed, so that they all fit within the correct color of cardstock that you have on your mat. Alternatively, you could also go back into Canvas Workspace and rearrange the designs in the software, and then resend the design over to your ScanNCut. So if there are any design elements that you want to add, like gems or these little dots that I added to the dress, then you want to add them and then let them dry before assembling the box. And the box was pretty straightforward to assemble because that designer had included those instructions. You start by just gently folding on those dashed cut fold lines. And I added some double-sided tape to the flaps of the box and then folded on those fold lines, remove the paper backing from the double-sided tape, and adhered the flaps to create the box. Here's another little tip for you. You can do what I did, is I actually cut this out first out of like a cheap construction paper so that I could play around with how to assemble it. And then I cut it out of this nice cardstock so that if I did make any mistakes with that first one, you know, it wouldn't waste any of the nice high quality cardstock. Then just add a thin ribbon through the holes and tie a little bow. This is a 1/8 inch ribbon that I got at the craft store, and that the 1/8 inch size was really a perfect width because I tried using a 5/8 inch and it was just too wide to fit through the holes, and it was too hard to open and close. Now the assembly for the tux box was essentially exactly the same as the dress. You fold on those fold lines, add some double-sided tape, remove the tape backing, and fold the flaps to keep the box together. With the tux though, you do have those little other bits like the shirt and the tie, and the shirt I applied with a few strips of double-sided tape. And it probably would have been a lot easier to add the shirt before assembling the box, but I was able to, you know, slip it in there. On the front of the box are these little lapels from the tux jacket and fold lines, so you fold those back. And to make them stay down, but to still have a little bit of dimension, I adhered them with some very small double-sided foam adhesive square. And then as for the tie, you have a couple different options. I decided to use the longer tie, and I adhered that with some white glue. Just a little dab on the back, and I pressed it to the shirt. And you could actually assemble the whole box with white glue. You would just add the white glue to the flaps as you were assembling the box, and you would just have to fold and then hold them in place while the wet glue dries. Here's another look at these darling 3D favor boxes. I just am so happy with how they came out. They're so adorable. And here are a couple more that I made in pink and navy. And, you know, this really just goes to show you how there's not any limits to the creative possibility you have, even with a single design file. Like the wedding dress cut in pink, I mean, this would be the perfect little favor box for like a princess party or even like a prom gift maybe. I mean, use your imagination. You can find the design files for these in the Papercraft SVG design bundle at Fontsy, so there's a link in the description to that to check it out, plus the many other and fabulous paper projects you can create. So I hope that you find that this tutorial inspires you to get crafting with paper, and I hope that you found it helpful working with your ScanNCut. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!